Hi everybody, thank you so much for attending the SAP webinar on getting back to business better than usual. I'm Paul Arkwright, publisher and editor-in-chief for HR Magazine, and I'm your facilitator today. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we're covering in today's seminar, and then I'll introduce our panel who are here with me today. So we know that we've been on the back of months of protests, and that's caused huge disruption to businesses. And on top of that, we've now had all the new challenges that have come up with COVID-19 and the pandemic that's really brought global implications to businesses and to employees across the world. So employees, most people are working from home. This is why we are live streaming to you today. And so that's created a whole gamut of challenges for companies, for organizations to deal with that disparate workforce that's been forced upon everybody. HR is having to communicate a lot more frequently with staff. And that's brought its own unique challenges as well, because it's all very well having the technology, but you've also got to be able to use that in an easy way that's intuitive if you're going to maintain that communication and constant source of information for the staff. So another big challenge is financial, and a lot of companies, particularly SMEs that don't have huge coffers, are running on empty, if not close to empty, in terms of cash flow. And that's bringing up another set of challenges for organizations, because we've got to try and keep things going in terms of the business. And so that's requiring some adeptness and agility in terms of financial reporting, in terms of keeping cash flow moving as well. And so today, that's going to be one of our key topics that we're going to touch on, is that aspect of agility. And how do you actually achieve it? It's a very easy word to say, but it's something that's very difficult to actually achieve in reality. So today, on both our panel discussions and on some information seminars a bit later on as well, we are going to have a look at how we can enhance agility within the organization, how we can get ready for the uptick that is going to happen. Hopefully, I say hopefully, we are going to see an end of this pandemic, and after that, people are going to need to move very, very quickly. Businesses are going to need to adapt to this in a speedy and agile way. So we'll be looking at how can you do that on limited resources, okay, and how can we leverage technology to help us with that, both on a financial side in terms of maintaining that cash flow and getting faster forecasting for what-if scenarios in the future, because we don't know what will happen, so we have to be very flexible, but also from a HR perspective in terms of using technology to keep staff updated of very rapidly changing situations. So we're going to look at how you can enhance productivity, how you can boost efficiency, how you can keep the budget controlled so that you're limiting the spend and lowering the total cost of ownership of particular technology systems that can help with that. And at the end of the day, it's no point having the best system in the world if it's complicated. So we're going to look at some simple solutions that are easy to implement and easy and intuitive for people to use. Now, as I mentioned, today's format, we're going to start off with a panel discussion, and then we're going to go into a webinar that will run for about 90 minutes in total. So let me introduce the members of the panel to you. So over here, I have Julien Kester-Semeillon. That was fairly close, okay. He is the pre-sales manager for SAP Cloud, okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Julien. And then we have Margaret Chen, head of HR for Greater China for SAP. Thank you so much for Margaret coming. And over here, we have Hermie Chu, territory director for Hong Kong for SAP Concur. Thank you so much for joining us, Hermie. And over there we have, you can't see him, but that is Kinson Lam. He'll be joining us a little bit later. He is Solutions Consulting Manager for Greater China for SAP Concur, and he'll be giving us a sort of standalone session a little bit later on. So thank you very much for everybody for coming. Let us now give you a brief introduction to the platform that we are putting this out on. So on your screen right now, it's pretty functional. You will see a lot of different windows on there. In the top top left-hand corner, you'll probably see a nice picture of me. If you scroll through that one, you can see all of our speaker bios on there, so you can learn a little bit more about our speakers. Underneath that, you'll see a little box that has Q&A written on it, and no surprises there. You can put in your questions on that Q&A box there, and they will come to us live. So we'll be looking at those questions, and then we'll be answering those questions a little bit later on in our panel discussion. So do please send in your questions, and then we'll address as many of those as we have time for. In the middle of your screen, you can see either a PowerPoint presentation for some of the standalones, or hopefully now you can see us on the panel in there in your media player. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, you can use this one at the end. This is a little survey box, and we'll just get your feedback on what you thought of the seminar as a whole. You can use the little buttons down the bottom to toggle all of those on and off, and change the size and the place of them at your will. But for now, focus on the media player, and let's watch our panel. So let's get on and talk about this now. And I want to come, our first question here is, with so many staff having to work from home right now, it has become a real challenge with those disparate workforces to keep them up to date. From a HR perspective, there are a lot of messages that we need to get out to them, but it's actually very challenging to do so. So I'm going to come to Margaret first on this one, and I'm going to ask you, what can HR do in order to enhance that communication and keep that communication going even when people are not in the office?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So first of all, when the pandemic happened, right, our priority is, of course, the safety and well-being of our employees. So we immediately asked everyone to work from home. And with that, on the other hand, we also have to ensure the continuity of our operations, right? So what do? We are lucky in the sense that, a few years back, we have already moved our HR solutions to the cloud. So we kind of enable us to run the operations as normal. Let me give you an example, right? Just right after our Chinese New Year, we are running our annual compensation review cycle, which is an exercise involving everyone in the company. And for Greater China, we are talking about over 6,000 employees, right? And within 3 weeks' time, right, even though everyone is working from home, everyone is working remotely, we were able to complete the entire exercise with covering 6,000 employees. We also did 5,100, bonus allocations. We did over 2,300 equity allocations. And on top of that, we did roughly about 1,400, career progressions and promotions as well. And everything happens when people worked remotely, people worked at home. So I guess the fact that we moved our solutions to cloud actually really enabled us to do that. So on one hand, we ensure normal operations. On the other hand, we also want to get a sense on how our employees are feeling, right, during this time when they are all working at home, not really connecting with each other. So we also run a remote work pulse survey with our employees. We did the first one in March and a follow-up one in April, just trying to gauge the sentiment of our employees. And I'm happy to say 70% of our employees in Greater China are actually feeling positive, right? That's what they're telling us. And roughly about 12% relatively negative. And we also dig into some of the feedback they provided as to what we need to improve to make them more positive. And it all boils down to communications. Apart from formal communications, they are also looking for informal check-ins, right? So we actually requested our leaders, apart from doing the normal communications cadence, add on informal check-ins with their teams, and of course IT support is also critical at this moment when everyone is working at home. But the good news is, overall, in Greater China, with our 6,000 employees, as well as their families, they are all safe and healthy, and we don't have one case here in the region, which is good news.
That's fantastic news. So we're talking about a huge amount of work going on there. So people were actually at home and getting promoted while they were at home.
Getting promoted, getting their bonus, getting their equity.
And how long did that process take? You mentioned it was 6,000 employees.
Yeah. Everything done in 3 weeks' time.
That's pretty impressive then. Okay. And so, okay, moving on from that, it's obvious that the leveraging the sort of IT can help with that sort of communication. But I find I talk to a lot of companies in terms of the different systems that they have in place in their organizations. And the challenge for most organizations is even though maybe if you're lucky, HR might have 1 or 2 systems that they're using, invariably the CFO and the finance stream have another completely separate set of systems that they're using, and they don't tend to talk to each other very well. So I wonder, like, what can we do in terms of assisting the finance stream to talk to the sort of HR stream a little bit better? And how can we sort of make it easier for people to have a unified platform where we can analyze metrics more easily? So Julien, if I can come to you on that one.
Yeah, I think that's a key topic when we talk about the speed and the agility that you mentioned, right? Indeed, some companies have even different systems just for HR, right? So running the hiring function, then the job posting in another system, and then the core HR in another system. So it becomes, just for HR, very difficult to monitor what matters, just in the realm of HR. When you try to connect that to finance, it becomes even more difficult to, let's say, not achieve visibility, but to achieve it fast, right? If you don't have one single system, there's no, we've not found yet a superhero called like Super Data Crusher or something, right? You're gonna have someone having to take the data, maybe a few people take the data, mash it up, and gather some insight out of it. And this is going to take, what, maybe weeks or more than that before you can make a decision. If you want to come to, I would say, a flow state, a way of making the best decision as fast as possible, I like really the concept of agility, which is being able to get the data, plan, execute, analyze, plan, execute, analyze. The only way to get that is indeed to have, well, one single platform with HR data, finance data all together, and one single system of analysis, so that, yeah, you can make the decisions, and I would say trial and error through this planning, execution, and analysis cycle. So
a sort of single source of truth for people to share their information on. Okay. And in terms of like speed, how long does it take to get systems like this up and running? Because I think we've talked about agility being important, and that means speed. So give me an idea. How long is a piece of string? How long is this going to take?
No, sure. And I mean, I don't like the answer of saying it depends, but part of the answer is it depends, right? It depends on many parameters, which is the size of the company, geographical spread, complexity as well, the organization structure. All of it make it each time more complex, right? Now to say, well, if you take, let's say, a whole system to support your HR function, we call it like the whole HR suite, if you'd like. A good rule of thumb would be to say between 3 months and a year, depending on the complexity, the module that you add, and the result that you want to get out of it. And also how fast you can adapt to the change. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, employee experience is something we touched on there. It's important to keep people engaged, particularly when they're working away from the office, never more so, because often they may be isolated, they're feeling a bit left out, they can't even go for lunch with colleagues anymore. So it's become very important from a HR perspective to engage them and keep them with the organization. The government is also helping in terms of trying to encourage companies to keep their staff and not let them go. But from a HR perspective, this is an internal process. This is something that requires having the best experience possible for the staff. So if I can come to you, Hermie, and see what can you share in terms of advice for HR? What should they be doing to make that happen?
Yeah, I think like to make that happen, I think HR or the whole company should provide consumer grade level user experience to employees, which means that the tools should be very easy to use, intuitive, and user friendly. So it can ensure that the adoption rate will be very fast with very minimal training. I think that is one point, because even you have the most powerful tool in the world, but if the people are not using it, there is no value at all, right? So the second thing I think that it would be like people right now overload with a lot of information. So the tool should be able to be interactive to the employees, provide the right information at the right time to them, so for them to make the decision and do their work. So for examples, if you're going to a particular location for traveling the business trip, you would like to know like what the flight class you can book and what types of hotel you can book beforehand. And also it would be great if the company or the system can tell you exactly what's the risk level of that location, where there is some kind of risk event, crisis happening, so you can get prepared and the company can also provide assistance if needed. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you bring up the topic of travel because, I mean, I've never seen a time when travel advisories are changing on a day-to-day basis as to how long quarantine periods are, as to whether flights are open or not, whether airports are open. How isn't this going to overload staff with huge amounts of information?
So the reason why I mentioned is like it should be specific to, you can pinpoint the locations of employee to provide the relevant information. For example, you're in Hong Kong, so and I would let you know some information related about the risk event, maybe like social unrest or like the epidemics or whatever information that is relevant to you. Yeah, okay, so that is the beauty of the system.
This is like a total filter, and it's just making it a unique message for each individual employee as to what they need to know and when they need to know it. Yes. Okay, that's good. Well, Margaret, you're sort of from the HR side, okay? You're in charge of HR for the whole of Greater China. Tell me a little bit about what it's been like in terms of adoption of this kind of system then, and from the practical perspective.
Well, adoption is really good because the system is mobile enabled and it's really easy to use. Everything is actually at your fingertips, right? And people feel that they are easy to access the information they need, the data they need anytime, anywhere. So that really helps to drive adoption. And apart from what Hermie has mentioned, right, we are able to incorporate different policies in the system. Say, for instance, now because of the pandemic situation, we are putting extra approval process in place for really allowing people to still continue to do business critical travels, and that can be also enabled through the system as well.
And in terms of, like you mentioned earlier that when you did the Pulse survey, that although happily 70% of employees are feeling optimistic, yeah. It's inevitable in any organisation. Yes. There's going to be some staff who don't feel that way, are sort of suboptimal in terms of how they're feeling. And particularly in Hong Kong, I feel, with the stress of the protest, that this is mental stress as well as physical inconvenience. With the protests and then into the COVID-19, financial worries for a lot of people as well. Yeah. What do you think we can do to sort of abate and make it a little bit easier on staff who are working from home and feeling new stresses that they may not have experienced before? What can HR do to help alleviate that situation?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I think we are all in the situations where this is something we have not faced before. And for us in HR, it's really important for us to understand the sentiment of our employees. How are they feeling, right? When they are working from home, what kind of support do they need? Whether it's, we are also taking into consideration their mental health as well, right? So we are providing assistance like the employee, the EAP program. We arrange webinars to help employees to understand, how to manage the stress at home and so on and so forth. And all these are based on the feedback that we get, through the Pulse survey that we are running on a regular basis. As I mentioned earlier, we did one in March to get the first instance of their feelings, and then we do a follow-up in April just to continue to gauge the sentiment of the employees. And with the feedback, we were able to put together an action plan that is relevant to them, right, and help them to continue to improve on their situations.
And yeah.
I mean, I'd like to add, like, from the employee perspective, I mean, it really works, like in these days where you're working from home or you're just focused on your laptop and it seems that nothing else exists. When you get an email from HR, remember the courses that we got around manager stress or mindfulness at home or how to manage the stress for parents, I think, oh, the organization is caring for me. I mean, genuinely, and it's just, it seems to be a detail, but it's huge in terms of the sentiment, the feeling that it can create and the motivation it has.
I think that's a very important point, because sometimes it's easy for HR to get very attached to some new technology and think this is a great thing, and then remember, oh, actually the human side is the most important side. So this, using the technology, leveraging the technology to show that you care, to show that you do listen to the feedback, and then things are implemented afterwards. I think that's the key to success there. So we talked a couple of functions there that may be useful. Let's sort of deep dive a little bit more into and broaden it to if we're talking about travel and expenses and managing the sort of financial side of things a little bit more. What do you think HR can be leveraging in terms of the technology to make that side of life a bit easier and a bit more seamless in terms of the financial management side?
Okay. So I think I would like to share with you, like right now, a lot of organizations, particularly the SMEs, so they will let the user departments to initiate the purchases. So that means that it will give the financial difficulties to know like what spend they have committed, and then they don't know to each department how many POs they have placed it or whether they have received an invoice. Because my client always share with me, like for the finance department, when they receive the invoice, it's always very late. So there will be induced like overdue payment, and the company credibility will be adversely affected. So they would like to have a system that can help them to capture the invoice data on day one when the invoice is received from the vendor. So it can give the full visibility of the cash flow position for better forecast, and they know what invoice they have to pay or whether there's a lot of outstanding for the POs. So this one can give the full visibility for the company to manage their cash flow, and also to decide how to locate their fund to better use that is related to a business purpose. Yeah.
And let's talk about, from a HR perspective then, the use of things like sort of bulletin boards, and how do we make those less overwhelming in terms of the amount of information that's given to the staff?
I think currently, because of the overwhelming information that people can gather, right, on all kinds of platforms, the employees are actually relying on the company to provide them, the correct information. So as a company, we on a regular basis, right, make sure that we are bringing to the latest information to our employees. And before we do that, we have to ensure that the accuracy of the information as well, so that the employees can trust that whatever they get from the company is the right information, and this is what the guidance and everything they need to follow.
Now, that sounds good, but what if I'm at home and I've got maybe grandma and granddad to have a look at, I've got 2 kids and a cat and a dog running around, and I miss the email, I miss looking at that. Yeah. How does it cope with situations
for
like
that point, maybe I can add more. I think, like as you mentioned, like that people will be overlooked by the information like email. Even like for you log in the system, there will be a bulletin board telling you what have been changes in the travel and expense policy, but sometimes you don't read it. So there's a lot of way. For example, when you really file the expense claim, there will be a prompt to tell you the new policy. And also for a lot of companies, like they have different policy for different user groups, cost center, or even for expense categories. So you need a system that can also give you the relevant information at the right timing. So to tell you, for example, what is your expense limit, or whether there's extra approval required for this particular expense. So there is a lot of way that we can keep educated the users, their new policy, and they will be encouraged to be more responsible for their spend behavior. Yeah.
And those prompts, what format do they take?
So it will be on the fly, means that when you write, for example, I wanted to entertain my client like 50,000, that is already exceeding your limit. There will be a prompt telling you that your limit is in this amount. If you need to expend more, then you need to get an extra approval from the CFO. So they know that what they can spend, and also that will change their behavior to making them more responsible, more educated about the policy. Yeah.
And that comes on email, or it comes on my phone? Or?
No, when you're using your mobile phone or mobile app to do this kind of expense request, you already see the message there. So you don't need to rely on email.
I can see that right in the restaurant.
There will be a prompt alert like yellow flag, red flag, and definitely you will not miss it.
Okay, well that sounds pretty useful, yeah.
And it's all automated, so not to worry.
Now that does sound pretty impressive, but I'm thinking, what if I'm a smaller company? Okay, this sounds like it could be phenomenally expensive. What if I have a very limited budget and I'm interested in using a system like this, but I have to limit my spend. Everybody's in the same boat at the moment. Cash flow is very tight. So, Julian, if you want to share a bit on that, how can smaller companies leverage something like this?
Sure. So there are a few answers to this. First of all is the fact that we're talking about cloud solutions, right? So in terms of and cloud is mostly driven by, being fast, and also the decreasing the TCO, right? You want something which is optimal, right? And the concept is based on deploying
the total cost of ownership.
Exactly. Yes. And the concept of having to, let's say, configure your system versus customizing your system. What does it mean? It means that instead of having an army of consultants to deploy your system and to spend maybe a year to customize your system, it can take, as we said, a few months to configure and to get it up to speed. So just the cloud model itself is making it easier, right? Second thing is the embedded intelligence, and I would even say the templates which are in the tool, in the different tools actually. I mean, we take all the cloud solutions, and even when we've reached such a big customer base, we're talking about thousands of customers, we've factorized, if it makes sense, all the best practices from the market into a deployment model, right? So even to roll out let's say success factors implementation based on what we call the model company, you take all the best practices, you take the whole package, and it can be up to speed in 3 months, right? So it is faster, it is cheaper as well. The last thing is about also the modularity of the offer, right? So obviously, I mean, I'd say the holy grail is to have this like big intelligent system that spans across expense and spend and HR and all. But the truth is that if you're a company maybe of 100 employees, you might need to have a fully blown workforce planning to go to that speed state, which is to plan, execute, and iterate and analyze. You might just need to, try, analyze, execute, analyze. So this module of workforce planning might not be needed, right? And this goes like this for all the solutions, right? You can have the full picture, or you can go more into an a la carte mode, take the piece of the software which is the most important for you, and this way also cutting down the costs. Yeah.
So it's going to be much faster using a cloud model because we avoid the long warm-up time of having to integrate and tweak our own systems. It's using a sort of model company, so we're leveraging all of those best practices right from the get-go anyway, so much faster to market on that one. And then that modularity helps us to sort of pick and mix as to what solutions we need. Now, okay, if I'm having to pick and mix, if I'm having to choose the best of the best, then in terms of a sort of talent management system, from a HR perspective, I've got to be quick. I've got to make this as quick as possible. Now, of course, longer term, I might want to do lots of fancy things, but at the moment, what should I focus on first? What's most critical?
Yeah. So in terms of, indeed, I mean, the whole topic of speed, you need to have people being operational fast, right? Which many organizations say, okay, well, this is what we have, now go work and learn new stuff and just be faster, right? Kind of putting pressure. It can work in some businesses, but many times at some point you see the failure of it. Enabling people through, first of all, and I'd say it depends on the industry, the amount of structured learning you need to give to people, but there's always a piece of structured learning which is important to get up to speed fast, right? Think about like a boot camp or something, right? So this piece would be leveraging the learning management system. Then there is also a big portion, and we've seen that with this whole home office scheme, which is collaboration, which happens, I'd say, naturally, and more in Hong Kong, which is a small territory, like very face-to-face culture. We would not digitalize that. You can just grab a taxi to go from one side of the island to the other, right? So the collaboration is natural. Now, digitalizing it enables, I'd say, not only the employees which are remote to work, but also we can see some optimization of the work. Even if you show up in the office, now we're used to all collaborating on the same document, which is just feasible through digital, right? So I would say, to summarize, the learning management, everything which is around learning, structured, non-structured, so it could translate into a learning management system, into collaboration software as well, are very key in that step of the journey.
Okay, so on the one side, we've got that sort of structured learning and social learning and making it as easy as possible. On the other side, we've got the money side. I think that a lot of sort of procurement managers and CFOs are under a lot of pressure at the moment to squeeze vendors and get the best value for money out of them. So what would be your advice, Hermie, in terms of sort of productivity and spend considerations for the finance side?
So I think like the first, you have to ask yourself two questions for this one. Firstly, do you know what you are spending on what from by whom or on what purposes? So after you got the visibility, you need to decide whether you have to spend the most, on the dose that is really matters. And also by making use of this data, you can do a lot of things. Firstly, you can identify a lot of cost-saving areas. For example, you can negotiate better rate with your vendors, and you can also see whether there is some unnecessary expenditure. You can cut down or even reallocate the fund to some productive areas. And also, you can also check your expense against your budget, ensure that you are within budgets. And also, you need to check whether your company's compliance is being followed. So you can cut a lot of like our policy spending. So all this add up can help the finance or the organization to have a better profitability.
And how do you ensure better visibility throughout that process? So people, you mentioned earlier that it's important people can see it the whole way through. How does that happen?
Yeah, okay. So for the visibility, definitely you need to capture data as soon as it happens, right? So you have to use a good spend management system, like for example, for the SAP Concur. So the customer can have the users can see the data at day one when it's incurred. For example, travel and expense, before the trip or during the trip, the data is already captured automatically. Let's say you are swiping a credit card, data is already flowed in. Also data can be flowed directly from the vendors like the airline or hotel or even Uber, right? So you got all the data. The expense report literally writes itself. So it helps the finance got the visibility at the time the spend is happened. Yeah.
And I think I'd like to pick up on those sort of T&E expenses, because there's going to be a huge uptick in terms of travel expenses. There's a lot of pent-up travel waiting to happen once the quarantine restrictions get lifted. So, tell me some of the major advantages of using a system that can capture that data real time.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of advantages. As I mentioned, for the employees, they find it very easy to use too. The adoption is high, then it can make their life a lot much easier. And then for the approvers, it also helps them a lot because there will be embedded policy that help to check the spending against the company policy. If there is any exception, there will be alert. So the approver find the work very easy. They don't need to check against the T&P policy, or they will not be rubber stamping again. So they can see whether they need to approve it or reject it to have a delay the spending. And also for the finance, I think right now they spend least amount of time on the processing because, as I mentioned, the system already help them to do all the checking. And also there will be seamless integration with the back-end finance system. And then that means that it will be very easy for the finance to complete all the processing. So it will be good. Finance leader also got a lot of visibility, as I mentioned, to identify those cost-saving areas.
And that'll help them obviously with forecasting as well, because they can see what's being spent by whom and where.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, Margaret, I'd like to sort of look at the technology that's been taken up in terms of pushing out learning to wider audiences with people at home.
Yeah, so we also see an uptake of the online learning that we are offering to employees, right? In the past few months, I think the fact that people are all working from home, they are also leveraging on the time that they have to really see, whether they can acquire new skills, what are some of the learning that's available. And we do see a very good uptake on our learning platform, and people can now really get the experience of they can learn anytime, anywhere, according to their own schedule, right? Instead of, always you're doing a face-to-face, on-site learning workshop.
Well, so far I've heard plenty of ideas. I'm a bit worried about money, okay? So if I've got limited resources, how can I prioritize my spending? What sort of considerations should I be thinking about there? So Hermie, I'll come to you.
So I think the key thing is you need to spend on what matters most to your business outcome. That means that you need to relate your expense to the business outcome you desire. Take an example, you have a top sales who spend a lot of money to entertain a customer. So you need to know whether the revenue generated justify the investment. And also, for example, you have take up a new project. You wanted to know how much you spend on the T&E or like the indirect purchases, so you can make a wise decision on your investment. So I think that is the main thing, that we need to relate the result with the expense.
Well, I'm gonna come to each of you now and just give me a sort of 20-second take-home for our audience listening today that you think would help them most at this time. So, Julien, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's, as we just said, it's important to set priorities, to keep in mind this important for speed and the importance of agility. From there, like what solution you're going to choose is going to be, I'd say, natural in terms of picking up what you need from the whole menu, make a whole journey out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Margaret?
So if I may, I like to quote, Winston Churchill. He once said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Right. So I think there's a lot of learning we learned from the past few months, and there will be further disruptions to come. So how can we, from an HR perspective, really get our organization better prepared and our workforce better prepared for the next disruption? And how can we continue to build in the agility into the organization, leveraging on technology?
Great. And Hermie?
Yeah. For me, I think if we talk about a winning employee experience, that would be the one that can deliver value to the employees and also the employers. I think that is a key point. So as we all discussed before, like if your employees got a very easy to use tool, for example, like manage your travel, expense or invoice, the company at the same time gain the same benefits. They got the visibility, they can control their budget better, they can have the cash flow management even further improved. So I think there is a balance. There will be a win-win situation for the employees and also the employers.
Okay, great. Well, we've got some amazing sharing there. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll just try and sort of pull that together. So a theme that I've heard throughout this is that by the use of technology, we should be standing on the shoulders of giants. If we're going to have another quote from, I think that was Galileo, that if someone's gone to all the hard work of creating a best practice system, why would we waste a year of time trying to develop a clunky old one that we have in place when instead we could just grab that one? And we don't need to grab the whole thing. We can grab it in a modular way. So we can pick and choose which areas we want to focus on first, the ones that create the most value to our organization right now. And so it's very important from the financial perspective to look at that and see what's the ROI. What is this going to give us? Maybe even a relatively small investment now that can be quite quick to market can create huge benefits for us later down the line. It's also important that we don't get stuck in the negative. If you, for goodness sake, put social media away, okay? Because if you highlight too much on all the negativity, it actually stops you looking forward. This is a fantastic opportunity, like Winston Churchill said, that now we can leverage this time. There's actually, people can be redeployed in different areas within the organization, and the use of technology can help with that so that we can get the most out of them and maximize that so that we hit the ground running when things kick off and when we have that huge uptick in business. But we've got to get prepared for that. We've got to have that agility built into the organization. There's never been a better time to start putting those systems in place. But be careful. It's not all about technology. It's no point having the most fantastic system in the whole world there. You need something that's user-friendly. So the user experience is extremely important from both the organization internal perspective of can HR use it, can the CFOs use it, is it talking to other systems, but also from the end user's perspective, is it easy for the staff to use as well. So thank you so much for that sharing. What I think we're going to do now is go to our questions that are coming in. And we've got quite a lot stacked up here, but I'll just get through as many as we can. So I'll take the first one here, which is, we are sort of using Zoom. Everybody's got familiar with that system nowadays. But what's the difference between your platform, sort of SAP, and just using Zoom? So Julien, if I can come to you with that one.
Yeah, sure. I love Zoom, and all this remote technology is excellent and useful, and I would say has become a vital need to keep on working from home, right? Now it provides just one piece of the spectrum, right? I would say it is the capacity to work together, to keep the lights on, to keep on doing the job that can be worked from home, to keep on doing them from home. But then when we take, again, this vision of being fast and to plan, execute, analyze, and iterate, you're not going to be able to do that with Zoom, right? To train really people, to get that structured learning that you need for being fast-paced, and actually the whole flow around planning, analyzing is not going to be provided. So it is a great starting point, I would say, even necessary for many organizations. Now it's a starting point, and actually we complement it. It's a complement, I'd say. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people had concerns about security on Zoom. How would you sort of allay fears about security when we're using online platforms?
Yeah, well, and I would say more as a cloud company, security is really at the core, right? I mean, we're scrutinized, and we have to go through so many, like, I'd say, third-party tests that we cannot get away out of it, right? So SAP takes it very seriously. We need to have security at the core of our cloud. So yeah.
Okay. So the next question on here is one about compliance, and the person is saying that compliance is one of the focuses of my company, but approval from different management areas may be required in some cases. It's not just one person. So if I'm using a system like Concur, can it do that? So I think I'll come to Hermie for that one.
Yeah. Yes, definitely it can do that. As I mentioned before, you can, based on the company's requirement, to have a very flexible setting of your approval flow. Depends on expense categories, your employee profile, or the cost center. So for example, if your employee apply for HR related expense, after line manager approve it, and after that, maybe the head of the department approve it, maybe that HR department head also need to approve it because it's HR related. And also, for example, if you are going, an IT person going for a trip on behalf of another cost center, or maybe the marketing. So usually we need to have the cost allocation, get the head of marketing to approve it. So this is some type of approval that some company would need, and that would be easy to set up.
And is that sort of budget control done real time, or there's a delay, or?
Oh, it's real time. What I mean real time is when the time the employees apply for that budget, they want to purchase something or they want to go on a trip, the budget owner or the manager can see exactly what is the impact on the budget, so they can decide whether they approve it or ask them to delay it a little bit. So it's real time, yeah.
Okay. So if I come to our next question, that is, what are the key challenges that companies face in implementing a digital employee experience? Okay, so maybe I'll come to Julien first on that one, and then Margaret, maybe I'll get a HR take on that one. So what do we mean by digital employee experience first?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, actually, because it's kind of a buzzword to say, well, many things, right? The first thing is, well, how the employee are going to, feel, perform, and so many other things, right? And I would say there is, and it's part of the challenge, a misconception around employee experience being kind of an afterthought in implementing a whole HR transformation project, right? While actually it is something that you can put up in place, and that companies have put up in place during that crisis very fast, right? So to understand that you don't need to go through a whole transformation before thinking about putting people at the center is part of the challenge, right? And if I can add up on that, one of the main challenges is trying to do everything at once, to do things too big, right? To trying to do everything at once, and also to digitalize what has been done in the past, right? So what I mean by that is take what you have in your previous systems and try to do exactly the same in the cloud. That is a big challenge because it is a shift of mindset. It's a big opportunity to simplify, to sit down, to say, oh, actually, there's a ton of things that we don't need anymore, right? Shave it off and let's put what remains in the cloud. So this is a big challenge in terms of mindsets. And when this is overcome, there's a big room for improvement and speed. Yeah.
And Margaret, from the sort of HR perspective, what advice would you give them?
I keep thinking about this, right, and reflecting on what happens. And it becomes even more and more obvious these days with people working from home, that when we talk about experience, right, if we look at people working from home, they have demands from the family and demands from work. And how can we build an employee experience that provides that seamless transition, whether they are ordering a storybook for their kids online, the moment they do that's experience, and whether at work, whether they are going to open a headcount requisition in the system. How can we ensure that we are providing the same kind of experience for our employees, right? Because people won't differentiate. This is work, and this is what my expectation is, and this is my family, and this is what my expectations is. Everything's are coming together these days. So I guess from an HR perspective, when we look at digital employee experience, let's think of that consumer experience, that the same kind of consumer experience we need to bring to our employees. And what should that be, and how can we make that happen?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. When you pick up a smartphone, who reads the instruction manual for that? Nobody. It should be intuitive. It should just come like that. Well, I feel we've covered a lot, but we've only just sort of skirted on the surface of these things. So I would like to get your feedback on what you've thought of our panel discussion today. I hope you found it informative and at least sort of a key to opening the door to a larger conversation about digitalization, about leveraging such technology in your own organizations, particularly at this very, very challenging time, getting ready to be the best, getting ready to be much better than business as usual, to be a winning and agile organization moving forwards. So once again, thank you to everybody on our panel, to Julienne, to Margaret, to Hermie. And that's a wrap from me, Paul Arkwright, publisher and editor-in-chief for HR Magazine. See you next time.